Hello and welcome to the Divorced Dadvocate, where we help dads create a healthy and less traumatic divorce. My name is Jude and I am your host. It struck me the other day that we have not had an episode of practical advice in a while. So we are back today with a new episode of practical advice, and we're going to be talking about attorneys and the legal process. But before that, go to thedivorcequiz.com and complete the divorce quiz. It's going to be an awesome tool to help you gauge where you're at in the divorce process compared to others who have gone through it. It's just going to take a quick 10 minutes. It'll spit out some immediate results for you to gauge in 5 different categories. And there's one that unequivocally divorced or divorcing dads struggle with, and I wonder if you do too, because I see it mostly with most every dad that takes the quiz. But check it out. If you go through it, you have an opportunity for us to sit down, free, no obligation, go over your results and kind of gauge where you're at and what you've got going on. So check it out at thedivorcequiz.com, or you can also find it at the website at thedivorcedadvocate.com under the divorce quiz tab. All right, some practical advice around attorneys and the legal process. Now, if you are like I am, and if you're like most normal, sane people out there, you have not gone through divorce more than once or twice. And so knowing and understanding how to select an attorney, how to work with attorneys, the legal process and everything is just the same as anything else that you may have done once or twice. It is ambiguous, it's uncertain. There's so much around it that we don't know about. And so one of the greatest questions that I get, or questions that I get, is what is this process like, and how do I work with the attorney, and what is all of this? And so we're gonna try to shed some light on that today, and briefly go through some ways to at least help you to feel like you have a little better understanding of this. But one of the main things, one of the major things that I do in working with individuals is to help them know what to do and what to go through and what questions to ask attorneys, et cetera, when we're working in private sessions, which is a huge thing. And we'll talk a little bit about why that is coming up here. So let's start with the fact that just like learning any new skill or knowledge base, that you have to start with educating yourself. You have to learn what the process is. And so I would highly recommend that you take the time to read and understand what the state statutes are. Maybe Google what the maybe quote unquote divorce process in your state or in your country where you're listening, and see what kind of information you can find around what the process is, how you go about it, et cetera. Again, if you want to get into the details, I think getting into specifics about what the state statutes and reading those are going to go a long way in helping you communicate with attorneys if you end up having to have very detailed conversations with attorneys about things, or if you're in a very high conflict situation and divorce. So educate yourself. Another thing you can do, and one of the guys on our group calls always recommends this, and I think it's a fantastic idea, which is go down, find the court docket wherever you are either have or will be filing your divorce, and go and sit in on some divorce proceedings. They're all open to the public, but this is going to give you a really great understanding of what goes on. It's going to give you an understanding of how the attorneys work It's going to allow you to see good attorneys versus bad attorneys, because it's readily apparent when they're appearing before the judges. It's also going to help you see and understand how the judges or magistrates will be handling things throughout this process. And it's a very big wake-up call if you've not ever seen it. And I trust and trust me, you want to get this wake-up call, and you want to see this before you are in the courtroom. If you end up going to court and having a trial, then then being there and going, oh my gosh, this is not what I expected. Oh my gosh, I can't believe the judge just went through this so quickly, and my whole life is being decided in 2 to 4 hours of a trial in front of somebody that has probably spent even less time than that reviewing my case. So go down to the courthouse, check things out. Another idea, and this was one of our group meeting, one of the guys in the group meetings idea as well, was you can ask the bailiffs that preside through and secure the courthouses. You can ask them questions. You can talk to them in between breaks and whatnot. Some of them are not going to be very friendly because they're there just to secure the premise, but some of them will be rather talkative. In these guys sit in and they see and hear every single day everything that's going on, and they'll have a lot of information around the judges or magistrates, but even more importantly, they'll have information on the different attorneys, because a lot of these attorneys are going to be the same attorneys that are showing up over and over, the family law attorneys. So sometimes these bailiffs will have a good understanding of, well, this attorney is really good or very aggressive. This attorney is very nice and works very well, et cetera. But they might give you some good pointers and tips on which attorneys, if you have not already found an attorney, and then you can write those down and do some research into them and do your interviews and look for ones that will work with you. And we're going to talk about that in a minute too. So I thought that was a really great idea, a couple of great ideas from one of the guys in our group meetings, which leads me to, if you haven't checked out one of the group meetings, check it out. It's in the show notes, but we meet on the second and fourth Saturday of the month at 9 a.m. Mountain Time. And so it's just a great place to get information, get support, and just be with other divorced or divorcing dads. The next thing I'll say is set a goal and make a plan. You have to decide what it is that truly matters to you in the divorce. And so when I'm working in individual sessions with men, that is the first thing. And if you've downloaded the Dad's Guide to Divorce, and if you haven't, go to dadsguidetodivorce.com and download this guide. The first one that you're going to see on there, and the first one that I work with in the 5-step process in working in individual sessions, is to clarify your vision and direction. And so this is absolutely critical, because this whole process is very chaotic. And if you let the process just run your life, then you're going to be left with whatever it is that happens, however it happens, without really clarifying what you want and working in a direction that you want to see happen. So make sure to set the goals and the plan. If you don't have somebody, that's where a coach comes in really helpful, and more so than a therapist. Therapy and a therapist should be somebody that you definitely have on your team or part of your team that you create during this process. But a coach is going to help you to do that, to sort some of that out. Also help you through the process and removing some of the emotion and looking at things objectively. So if you have the means to do that, find a divorce coach that can help you through that process, in addition to the other professionals that you bring on board with you during the process. The next thing is falls in line with this as well, is don't file until you've considered how you want to divorce. And so what do I mean by that is that there are many different ways that you can go through successfully and execute a divorce. It isn't always just going and hiring an attorney and then starting with that, because immediately when you start hiring an attorney, attorneys are there and they're meant to go through this legal process, and many of them are just going to look to make this contentious. That's not all of them, but some of them definitely will, because this is how they make their living, and more billable hours means more money. But there are other ways to go through it. If you've checked out one of the early episodes, or not early episodes, but one of our earlier episodes, we had the Tom Milligan from ourdivorce.com. And with the phenomenal technology out there, he's been able to create an online portal that helps you go through. If you can collaborate with your soon-to-be ex and talk about things, a software will take you through it and allow you to, it actually prompts you on what you're supposed to do, what you're supposed to be thinking about, what financials you need to gather. And then it also has the forms that you can fill out to present to the court. But I would, and this is only in the United States. He's only working in the United States right now. But I do highly recommend, before filing and presenting to the court, that you do have an attorney look things over, because there are so many nuances in so many different parts of the country as well as parts of the world. Other ways you can go through it are mediation, and that's where somebody's just going to sit in between and help you talk through what it is that you want to do. Another idea is collaborative divorce, and collaborative divorce is becoming much more popular, and it's actually an attorney that does and knows the legal process and the legal system, but their whole goal is basically they're like the next step from a mediator. They're going to help both parties. They're not partisan to one or the other. They're there to just help mediate this process, but then they can also execute on that in filing with the courts, and then getting it done in an efficient and an effective way and amount of time. So if you are interested in that, you can Google collaborative divorce in your area, and it's a really, really fantastic way to go through it. And the fees are a lot less. You're going to spend a lot less money than having to go through each party lawyering up with their respective lawyers and then going through that process. Because when that happens, you're paying $300, $400, $500 an hour to have them send emails and make phone calls on your behalf. And as you can imagine, that gets pretty expensive. But if that is the process and the situation that you're in, depending upon what the relationship is that you have with your soon-to-be ex, then you absolutely do need to get good legal advice. It's this process is not set up or structured to be user-friendly. And while every court has their pro se, which means you're representing yourself, their information center staffed with some hourly employee that's not really going to be incredibly helpful, the legal system is structured by and adjudicated by attorneys. So it is set up in order for attorneys to have control over the entire process. And I can tell you, having gone through parts of my post-divorce in the courts as representing myself as pro se, you're going to get absolutely steamrolled if you do not get good legal advice. So whatever you need to do in order to get legal advice before you pull the trigger on this, whether you're going through the process or you're back in court after and you're needing to file motions or whatever, you need to get good legal advice. And so let's talk a little bit about how you go about doing that. You know, I would say you most definitely want to spend some time interviewing multiple attorneys, talking with multiple attorneys. Now, this might cost you some money upfront because they're most likely going to charge you their hourly fee to sit down with you. But I can also guarantee you that on the back end, it's going to help you immensely in one of two ways: not having found an attorney that actually you feel comfortable with and works well with you, and having to switch after and having that cost you massive, not massive amounts of money, but additional amounts of money because you have to get a new attorney up to speed. Now, that happens very often. It happened to me. I have clients that it happens to, and sometimes it just happens because the attorney doesn't work out. But it's going to definitely go a long way by sitting down, spending that money up front and talking with them. The other thing that it's going to help you do is see and understand if the attorney's temperament is in line with your temperament. There are attorneys that are going to be bulldogs. They're going to be very aggressive. They're going to be contentious. Now that can be a benefit and a positive depending upon what your relationship is with your ex and how you know your ex better than anybody else in this process. Whether that's going to be something that you need in this process, that you're going to need somebody that's going to be aggressive and be looking out for your best interest. Not that they all won't look out for your best interest, but like fighting for your best interest in a very aggressive manner. Or if it's somebody that is going to be more inclined to want to try to settle, and if you know that you think that that's going to be the case, and you can, you're going to mostly be able to work with your soon-to-be ex about how to get through things, but you still do need some legal representation, then that might be a better person for you. So that's important. And I would say interview at least 3. Now this, might cost you $1,000, but in the big, and that sounds like a lot of money, and it is a lot of money, but in the big picture of how much money you could potentially spend, which is a lot, then that's not a lot to make sure that you're in alignment with the attorney that you want or that you like. So let's talk a little bit about the court system. That was a little bit about the attorneys, and we could talk more and more and more. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how to communicate with your attorneys. But I guess I just want to reinforce with you that getting good legal representation is absolutely critical. And I'll just make this final remark: is this process is not one just to get through. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later also, that it's going to set yourself and your children up in the future. So it's absolutely critical that you have somebody that's going to help you get through this process. There are many pitfalls, and oftentimes in the process, it is not very friendly, and it's not very dad friendly oftentimes as well. So having somebody is critical, whatever you need to do, because here's what happens. If you don't get this structured, then you're in a bad situation. If you don't get this done right, you're in a bad situation, and then it makes your life more difficult, and it makes it more challenging for you to be able to parent as a single dad. So while this process is just awful and challenging and uncertain, that getting the good legal representation that you deserve through this is going to be critical. So that's it. That's the end of my diatribe about the attorneys. Let's talk a little bit about the system, though. And the first thing I want to say is, don't expect the court system to give you emotional justice. And what do I mean about emotional justice? Emotional justice is the judge could give a darn about how egregious your soon-to-be ex has acted towards you, or that she's had an affair, because most states are no fault, or what bad things she says to you or the kids, or how she treats you, anything like that, unless it has something to do specifically with the legal process, or with that it's legally relevant. And I'm sure there are bad feelings, but most of what that is, and most of that emotional justice or emotions that are going on, are not, have absolutely no legal relevance whatsoever. So, and I would also encourage that when communicating with your attorney too, try to take the emotions out of it. I appreciate how incredibly hard that is during this process, but that's also why you need to surround yourself with other divorced or divorcing dads, friends, family, hopefully a therapist, if not a therapist, a group or a 12-step group or a church community is somewhere, so that you can utilize them in order to talk to the emotional part of it and be able to separate that from the court process. I don't know how many times I hear guys talking about this, or I get on calls with guys and their attorneys, and they're just emoting about this and that, etc. And just know that you're doing a couple things are happening. One is you're paying a lot of money to somebody who's going to be, and when I say that to an attorney who's not going to really be able to do anything for you because you're emoting and it's costing you money while you do that. And then also in the court process, the judge just doesn't want to hear it, and they don't care. And they're already trying to get through their docket, and they don't have a lot of time. And I've heard from judges and magistrates that a lot of times their hands are tied. They don't have the time. They don't have the docket space. They need to get through cases. And this whole system, again, is not set up for to get into the minutia of stuff, to be your place to get your emotional justice. So make sure, and this goes back again to, we talk about all the time, taking care of yourself mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. So have that set up, have your team of professionals set up, get that therapy, whatever that you need to go through this, because the legal system is absolutely not going to be doing that. And this goes to my next point too, which is, and I just mentioned that, which is don't use your lawyer as your therapist. So, and look, they just, they're there to, they know the legal system. And they know how to get through the legal system, but they know how to get it through the typical hoops that you go through. So find a therapist that will help you, but don't try to separate these emotions. Try to think just completely rationally. And here's a little tip on how you can do that. Write out your story of your divorce and write it all out, and then go through and cross out all the parts that you wrote with emotions, and then read through it again. And that is going to give you emotions or feelings. So then when you cross out anything that has to do with emotions and feelings, that is then going to be all of just the facts of what's going on in your case. And then if you need to go back and revisit that every time you need to talk to your attorney, you can do that, because that's just going to be the facts of what's going on, minus all of the emotions. So that's a quick little tip. It's a very interesting exercise if you've never done it, in going through writing the story, because it's a story, right? And then like crossing out all the emotions, anything that you see that's emotion, feeling based in there, cross it out and then read through it. And those are just the facts. And that's what you want to communicate with your attorney. Now, another point with the attorneys is, don't let them give you a pie in the sky, sunshine view of what's going to happen with your case in going through this process. This process is a challenge and is going to take time, and it's not going to be like, oh, we're going to get this done. It's going to be real easy. Ask lots and lots of questions if you do not know or you do not understand what's going on. You are paying them. You are what I call driving the bus of this whole thing. And then you've got all of your professionals on this bus. You are the one in charge of your divorce. And we're going to talk a little more about that in a minute. But make sure to ask lots of questions, but don't let them sugarcoat it as well. But here's a little point of good news, which is my next one. Remember that most divorce cases settle, and I think it's 90+% of cases settle. It's the very small minority that end up going to trial. Unfortunately, those are the ones that you hear the most about. it's also a lot of the ones where we get involved in group meetings and stuff, and guys are just going through a hellacious time, and you hear a lot from them about that. That was my experience also, that we went to trial as well. So, but not all of them do. In fact, the majority, and well in the majority of them, do settle. So it is possible, and if you and your soon-to-be ex can at least communicate on some level, then the probability that you'll be able to get this done and get this settled is good. And I always say, if you can get to like 90% of where you feel comfortable with whatever the parenting plan and the financial situation is, then settle, because it's absolutely positively not worth fighting for that that last 10%. And here's the other thing about that is, if you don't settle, what you are doing is you are putting the fate of your family into the hands of somebody in a black robe that I alluded to earlier, has little to no idea about your family, about your children, has spent maybe an hour or two prepping for the case, and then maybe, depending on how long you are on your trial goes, at the most a couple of days listening to what's going on in your family. So you're leaving the decision of what's going to happen with you and your children for the next however many years that you all are together in the fate of this person's hands, who has no idea. And you have no idea what their biases are. You have no idea if on the day of your trial you show up and they're having a bad day. You have no idea if you look like or remind them of somebody that they really don't like. You have no idea. You're just leaving stuff up to fate with them and putting it into their hands. So if you can settle, if you can get that to that 90%, then go ahead, and as long as you feel comfortable, try to get things settled. A couple, I'm just going to briefly say these next two, which is just some specific practical advice when you're going through it, which is get copies of all of your financial documents as soon as possible. So if you are still in the process of contemplating this, start getting that stuff in order. If you're in the process, get your stuff. This stuff ends up sometimes mysteriously, for whatever reason, not to say that your soon-to-be ex is going to do anything nefarious, but these documents sometimes disappear magically. So get that stuff. Also, run your credit report. Run your credit report. It's going to see where you've got, so there's no surprises on there. Or, I've heard the story before where the soon-to-be ex opened some credit, and you'll be able to find that out through running your credit report. So those are just, so I'm not going to get into the specifics about financials and how to prepare for all that, but those are two good ones. Just get your financial information in order sooner than later, because that's going to be a big piece of it. That is one half of the piece. The other half of the piece is the parenting plan with the kids and with your soon-to-be ex. All right. Make financial decisions with your head, but temper them with your heart. You've got to think logically and rationally, not emotionally. Now, you don't want to be cold-hearted, you don't want to be cruel, but you want to try to balance your head and your heart. And this is one of the places where, if you've got somebody to bounce things off of, and again, here's the thing with friends and family, they're going to be really biased. And so they might say, oh yeah, you got to get what you got to get, and you deserve that, etc. They might not be the person to help you rationally and logically think through this without emotion. So this is where a good coach comes in, or somebody that's completely, it might not be where it may or may not be where a therapist will or will not help, but somebody that can just remove all of that and look at things with an objective lens for you. Next point is, don't give up the farm just to be done. This is a process, and the process is not slow. It doesn't get done in days or weeks. It takes months, and oftentimes more than a year, or could be up to a year, depending on how contentious it is. Or these days, with all the ridiculous COVID stuff and the courts, which you'd think would be more efficient on Zoom because there's no people coming in and out, it would just be on and off, actually are less efficient, which is actually, it's anyway. So there's the longer court processes is my point. So this is a marathon. It is not a sprint. And that, again, it goes back to why it's incredibly important to take care of your mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual self in order to go through this. You don't want, again, to be setting yourself up for failure once the divorce is over and you get into single parenting with your kids, and then realize, oh man, I really should have fought for this, or I should have structured this better, and this is making life unbelievably difficult for me and in turn for my kids, or how am I going to handle this? Do not get worn down in this process. And if you do start feeling you get worn down, get the help to figure out what you need to do in order to get that solid foundation to go through and get through this process. This is incredibly important. It was a huge mistake that I personally made, and just finally, after 15 months, just wanted to get this done and over with. And I promise you what will happen is there will be continued challenges post-divorce that didn't get dealt with in the divorce, that you're going to have to go back and you're going to have to continue to figure out and work out, and maybe even have to go back to court to get remedied. So make sure to not give up the farm and give up. Putting the kids first. We talk about it all the time. It's absolutely critical. And I can only say that hopefully this is your mindset. Now, you can't control your soon-to-be ex's mindset, but you can control your mindset and the trajectory from which you approach this. And putting them first is, absolutely critical. Now, sometimes that's really hard to do, again, with all the emotions that are going through, emotions about the divorce, emotions about the loss of the relationship, emotions and uncertainty about the future, etc. But do whatever you need to do to put the kids first. Get into therapy, talk about it, get into therapy with your kids, get into some family therapy with your kids, because that will also help you to kind of gauge where you're at with them and the decisions that you might be making, or how you're communicating and handling situations in the home with them during this transition. So I don't need to say too much more on that. Hopefully you are putting your kids first. If you do recognize and realize you're not, because sometimes it's hard and we don't always do it, and it's hard to do it 100% of the time, especially during this process. But once you realize it, take the initiative to make the change you need to. Mediating your parenting agreement and not fighting because it's not worth it. So this goes back to a couple of the previous points of, if you can mediate, if you can figure out the resolution and you're focused on what matters, mediating through this and not fighting is, look, the cost to this is a lot more than just money. So there's a time cost, there's an emotional and mental cost to this, and not just to you or your soon-to-be ex, but to your children as well. So if you can avoid fighting, and look, it takes two to fight. So again, and this also goes back to the balance, right? You don't want to give up the farm. You want to balance the logic with your heart, and you want to try to come to compromise. So some things you need to stand your ground on, some things you don't. Again, it's just helpful to have somebody process through this with you, because it is all a lot. But if you can mediate through it, if you can avoid the fight or getting into a fight or a battle on every single thing, that would be the best possible scenario. Now, also, if in an attempt to avoid the legal process as much as possible, if you can negotiate as much of this as possible with your soon-to-be ex, that would be really fantastic. And this is where the ourdivorce.com website would come in. I think it's free to use and go through all this. You can use the entire tool through the end until you need to create the documents, and then I think it's only $299. And Tom, if you're listening, this is a plug for you. You can get me back later, but that's incredibly reasonable. Even if you're going to take that, the $299, have all the documents, and then bring them to an attorney to review and just look over and say, okay, well, you haven't considered this. We need to add this in there, etc. Let me tell you, at $300 to $500 an hour, that you're going to save a ton of money. All right. Next point is be careful who you listen to. I already covered that point. Some of this stuff I'm so used to talking to and talking about and sharing with you all that it's pretty straightforward. But I'll just reiterate: your family, your friends are not unbiased people with an unbiased opinion. So I had a good friend, and it was a blessing to have him in my life during the divorce, because he was somebody that I could talk to and share and be able to just get through the process with. But looking back, I gotta say, he had some of the absolute worst advice for me going through this process. Fortunately, it wasn't legal. it was more social, but it's just an example of just be careful who you're taking advice from. Get your legal and your therapist, your social, emotional, and mental person, your financial person, your coach, your spiritual person, whether that's a pastor or somebody else in your life that can help you spiritually. Get all those people engaged and in your life, because those are the people on your team, and go to each of those individual people for your advice. And just be careful if they're giving advice outside of what you might feel is what they are best qualified to do so. Next point is ignorance is not your friend. Now, this was the first point I talked about, which was learning the process, but I want to take it one step further in this point, which is it doesn't matter if you don't know. It is incumbent upon you to know what's going on. So if something doesn't seem right, you need to go figure out whether or not it is or is not right. And you're gonna know this. If you feel like you're not getting the response from your attorney, then press the attorney. If you're not getting the financial information, or the financial information that you're receiving, let's say from your soon-to-be ex, doesn't seem right, don't leave it to the attorney to figure out, because the attorneys have a limited amount of time. They have multiple cases, so they're not like you and I, my friend. They are not going home every night and having your case on their mind all day and all night like we are. and they have multiple cases, and when they go home, they have their own life. So they are only focusing on you for the time frame that they are billing you. So if you don't think something is right, if you don't feel right, ask the questions. If you're not getting the answers, look for answers wherever you need to find them. Now, again, this, I keep saying it, but this is where a good divorce coach comes in and can say, have you considered this? Or why hasn't this happened? Or let's think about going this route. Absolutely, positively, you are in control of this yourself. But, which is my next point, is you're only in control of your part of this. You can't control what your soon-to-be ex is going to be doing, how they're going to respond to what you do. And I get a lot of guys, I get a ton of guys that will go through every scenario about, if I do this, or if I make this decision, or if I state what my need is around this, then it might prompt her to do that. I tell you, that is a recipe for making yourself absolutely crazy. And here's why. Think about all of everything that is going on in your head right now. It is the same thing on the other side with your soon-to-be ex. And so there's no way, because we're hardly figuring out and working through this ourselves right now. There's no way you're going to do that and figure out what she might be doing or thinking, or how she's going to respond, or anything. So stay in your own lane, focus on what you need. Now, this comes to what our last episode was, codependency. If you don't know and you can't figure out, and you're not working with somebody to create that clear vision and direction for what you want, and then are able to strategize those actions, create the environment you need, et cetera, through this process, then you need to figure that out. You need to focus on what it is that your needs are. That would be the first one. What you're feeling about this, and then what it is that your needs are. Because if you don't get your needs met, and I'm not talking about ridiculous needs, right? Like I need a Ferrari. I'm talking about basic, the basic needs of separating this, the financials, that you have enough money, you're able to support yourself, that you're going to be able to create a good home life and an environment for the children, et cetera. If you're not thinking about that, or you have problems in expressing that, then you need to get with your therapist right away. It might mean that you're codependent. You may mean that you're an overgiver, and that you need to focus on how you do that through this process. Because I guarantee, if you don't do it through the divorce process, you will just continue this same relationship post-divorce. Because here's the thing, as divorcing dads, it's different from any other divorce out there, is we are never completely separated from our ex, because we have a co-parenting relationship that involves our children. So absolutely, positively, figure your you know what out during the divorce around this, that you can control yourself, that you can figure out what it is that you need, that you can state what your needs are, and that you'll actually set the boundaries and stand up for your needs. That might mean that you have to go to trial. It might mean that she's not used to that, and she's going to dig in because she's used to you rolling over, and that she's going to fight this because she's not used to you saying this is something that's important, that is a need. So work your way through that. But again, good therapist, good coach will definitely help you through that. All right, next is take your time when making these decisions. Again, I give you that quick tip about how to remove emotions out of it, but I would always say take 24 hours at least to make a big decision. Sometime, and there, hopefully your attorney's on top of things if you're using an attorney. There are dates and deadlines through this process most of the time, but if your attorney is good, they're managing those timeframes, or if you're going through the process yourself with your soon-to-be ex, you guys know what those dates and deadlines are. do not make rash decisions, and do not let anybody force you to make a decision right off the bat. Take some time to think about it, because that will allow you to go through whatever process you have. And if you don't have one, learn to develop one to work through and do this, like I said earlier, without emotions, in a logical manner, and then take your time and make that decision. And then my final point is play the long game. I alluded to it earlier that this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. Don't be in a hurry to get it over with, because this has long-term implications, not only for you, but for your children going forward, depending on how old they are, how many they are. And it has implications around what your relationship is going to look like with your soon-to-be ex and with co-parenting. So really taking the time and going through this process, preparing yourself, understanding the legalities, taking your time at this. And even if it's going to take 2 years, it's going to be 2 years well spent compared to having to spend, let me tell you, on 10 years down the road, 10 additional years back and forth in courts. That is a lot less fun than really doing this for, and it's not likely to take you 2 years, but the 6 months to 12 months to get through this process, than have this be an ongoing thing for years or a decade. And I just laugh because I can laugh about it now because I have a perspective, but it's going to be much better that you do that and you play the long game than having to continually be fighting through this. It doesn't mean that you might not have some things you need to work out or tweak, but you'll have yourself in a much better place throughout this, throughout the subsequent years and post-divorce. Well, I hope those tips helped you. That's another episode of Practical Advice with Attorneys and the Legal System. We got a little more detail than I thought I was going to with some of that stuff, but I really hope that it helped you. And always, if you have questions about anything that comes up in any of these podcasts, you can just put some comments in below, or you can always reach me and schedule a time for a 30-minute free, no obligation consultation at talkwithjude.com, and you'll schedule directly into my calendar, and we can talk about whatever you've got going on. If you've got some questions about some legal parts of this, or you're just getting into this and you want advice on how to find an attorney, or anything else that you've got going on with your divorce, just go to talkwithjude.com and schedule an appointment. And as always, if you found value, please share this on social media. It would help me immensely. The community continues to grow. Leave us a review on the podcast platform you're listening to. Give us a star rating. That helps as well. And just spread the word, the Divorced Advocate community. I really appreciate you. Stay strong. God bless. We'll talk to you next week.